There's only one rule in this f***ing jungle. When the lion's hungry, he eats.
Hello there, this is Grill Chess Channel, and today's video is about the best chess player in the world, Magnus Carlsen, who recently participated in the Grand Chess Tour event in Poland, where he faced many top GMs. And every single time Magnus plays a tournament, it's really like a holiday, because his play is magical, I myself enjoy it, and he doesn't play tournaments that often. So we not get bored, and every time it's a really special occasion. So what was special about this exact tournament? And this was the fact that Magnus didn't crush anybody from the very beginning, and actually he was very close to be a runner-up. Haters already warmed up their fingers to write that something like Magnus is not the best anymore, his time has passed, blah blah blah, all the stuff. But let's see how Magnus proved them wrong, and let's see how the tournament was going, and we'll take a look at the most critical moment. And the first game was the Rapid that we're gonna analyze against the Chinese grandmaster Wei Yi, who actually fought for the first place with Magnus. And right here, Magnus managed to win the game in his kind of best style, just applying pressure, looking for small details, and let's see how it went. So right here, everything started with Sicilian. Magnus is a perfect expert in it. He plays Sveshnikov variation after d4, and he had many games in the World Championship title match against Fabiano Caruana. And right here, what happened in the opening? White has better development, white has two knights, black's pawn structure a bit ruined, but on the other hand, black has a bishop pair, which is a pretty valuable resource. White develops the piece. Knights usually like outposts, and the knight goes to c4 where he can attack backward pawn on b6, and Magnus brutally destroys the knight. And even though right now queen side completely undeveloped, black has an idea of finishing this development, maybe simplify the position, and white doesn't have any direct way how to crush the position of the black king. Rook d8, occupy an open file, bishop h6 allow us to trade the bad bishop, because all the pawns were on the color of our bishop. And right now position of black already doesn't look bad. Wei Yi actually not scared to play for a win, because if he wanted to draw, he could probably easily trade everything on the open file and most likely end up with a draw, but he tries his chances and going for b4, which actually creates a challenge. Magnus plays, I mean, kind of logical. He wants to keep the structure the same, but white then occupies an open file, and it looks like it's actually Wei Yi who will play for a win. He will try to open up. He will try to seize an open file, place the rook on the 7th rank, and apply some pressure, but Magnus decides not to wait. Carlsen immediately goes in the attack, trying to attack all these hooks, giving up the c5 pawn, but on the other hand, he takes the pawn on c3, defends the pawn on a5, and attacks the rook on b2. Rook b1 was played, rook d8. Already black has some options of counter-attacking the king, and that's the reason why Wei Yi goes away. It looks like right now white will play some rook b7, maybe later queen a7, really try to roast everybody on the 7th rank, but out of nowhere Magnus says no, not today. I'm gonna be the one who dictates everything, and he played g5. Move doesn't seem so dangerous, but if we look a little bit deeper, it prepares h5, g4, and we're trying to create an attack on the king. We're trying to open up some lines so that our rooks could attack from different angles, and the king actually is already in a pretty dangerous position, where he goes for counter-attack, because as it's well known, the best defense is attack. H5, rook b3 trying to attack the queen, queen a7, and seems like black is not in time with his attack, because white has serious threats, rook is under pressure, we are about to win the rook, but king e6, a really brilliant move, because it reinforces the structure, and yeah, it's like really bold move. King goes to the center, many heavy pieces around, but there is no way to get him. And after rook d7, queen a5, even though white won a pawn, black moves on with an attack, g4, rook d1 and rook h1 is coming, followed by queen f4 in the end with the mate. Knight g1, queen f4, king h1 takes, king already feeling not great. White trying to remove the queen, which is logical because when you under attack, it makes sense to trade off queens, but it didn't help because it's actually a Zugzwang, because the king in such a terrible spot that black needs only like a few moves to deliver the mate, and the game moved on. But it wasn't that successful for a Chinese grandmaster, and he resigned very soon because of this Zugzwang situation. So this is like typical Magnus. Applied pressure, even though position maybe wasn't the best or winning, maybe engine was even showing like more or less equality, but he found a way to apply some pressure. His opponent snapped, and here we are. Winning the game against his future rivals throughout the tournament. Next game, and next game is going to be about Nodirbek Abdusattorov, one of the strongest players in the world right now, top number 4 or 5, I don't remember honestly, like really young Uzbek star. And this game is also very interesting. It was also a rapid tournament. We haven't approached Blitz yet. And right here, everything started very solid, extremely solid. I don't know what can be more solid than the Petrov's defense. And from the beginning, nothing special. But when you know what sort of positions Magnus Carlsen like, there's nothing special equality. You do not comprehend like something good. You rather wait until something bad will happen, because Norwegian GM, ex-world champion, or the strongest player in the world anyway, can squeeze a lot of from like such even positions. He can win unwinnable. And right now, Nuremberg tries to attack the center, he tries to find some pressure, and that's what he's really good at. But you can't really surprise Magnus with that. Magnus goes with a pawn, sees in space, kicking away the queen from a good position. Bishop c5. Right now, by the way, black has an isolated pawn, which of course has some benefits, and in this particular case, it's some option to go knight to 4 where knight will be very annoying. But again, it's not really that scary, as Magnus proves. Right now, he creates another weakness on a7. Could black avoid it? Yeah, they could play b6, but then knight b5, bishop b5 could be annoying, and this pawn could be a hook in the long term. So b8 trade, bishop e3, knight e4. Seems like this knight planted for a long time, and Magnus thought the same way and took. And probably you wonder, why did he take? Like, why on earth? Like, I was told by my coach that bishop stronger than knight in open position, and this is open position, and that's all true. That's all fact. But what Magnus trying to say? I will take it, and then my knight will be not worse than a bishop, because it's also very well known that knight is good on outpost. Plus, next move, Magnus trades bishop pair, and therefore one bishop can be worse here than a knight, because he doesn't have a lot of open diagonals, he's not coordinated with heavy pieces, therefore knight can show his best qualities and like values and so on. And still, position is equal according to the engine, and like probably not so many people who were watching this game online would really think that Magnus would win. Plus, Abdusattorov is a really strong player. But right here, actually, it's hard to stop on some one moment. It just the whole picture. This is like typical Magnus. Tempo by tempo, move by move. Even if it doesn't look like he's creating any threats, he's constantly improving position. He constantly tries to apply some pressure. Queen e1, knight d4, attack the bishop, try to offer a queen trade. Why he wants to trade queens? Because then later on he will have outside passed pawn and really have a lot of benefits. That's the reason why his opponent tries to move the queen away. Rook a4, because he doesn't see the way how to apply more pressure on the 7th rank. Attacking b6 pawn. So like I will scroll down a little bit, but every single move he I mean, even though he doesn't have maybe any direct threat, he's about to create a threat. And this is really irritating when you're under constant pressure. You're defending, defending, defending. And at some moment, you can just get tired. Because, like, if you once been attacked, okay, twice, all right, 3 times, we can handle it. But when it's 10, 12, and so on, I mean, somewhere there is a chance that you will make a mistake. That was even the rule of Spassky, if I'm not mistaken. When you create more than 10 threads per game, it will definitely lead to some mistake of your opponent. And trade here, like again, many repetitions, many moves back and forth, trading rooks eventually, and trade now. The king of black goes into some dangerous position, and even though black has attacking potential later on, white continue giving different checks, white continue destabilize the situation. And Magnus was actually down to 34 seconds when Niederbeck had around 3 minutes. Still it's not so easy to defend. Right now he attacks the bishop. Queen goes away, it means that we can attack the pawn. And right now actually I don't know why this pawn wasn't defended, probably because Niederbeck wanted to play for a win, he played e3. Of course, by the way, better not to defend it with queen g5, because then after queen h8 the game will not last for too long. And then after e3 takes, Magnus got his point, got this tiny advantage, and it was already sufficient to win. He offers a queen trade, he goes for a tactic, he obtains 2 extra pawns in the queen endgame. Actually, queen endgames is a nightmare. If somebody tells you that he knows perfectly queen endgames, probably he's lying, because this is the best, I mean, the worst nightmare. This is the most complicated endgames, and it's always like a lot of different small nuances, and every position is different. There are general approaches, but still, queen endgames is some sort of lottery sometimes. And right here, Magnus step by step managed to win, because 2 pawns is a serious advantage. And like, I will scroll it down because, I mean, a lot of small moments, but long story short, it was sufficient to win the game, because it's not 1 extra pawn, 2 extra pawns is enough. And the game actually lasted for 107 moves. And eventually, I mean, grandmaster from Uzbekistan resigned, because there is g5 threat and there is just simple idea of taking the pawn. So this was rapid. These were like 2 games out of 3 probably that Magnus won in this tournament. The rest he made draws. But the most interesting part started during Blitz, because Magnus was on the 2nd place, half point behind of Wei Yi, and everything sounded perfectly. But then he, in the 2nd round of Blitz, faced praggnanandhaa, Indian young GM, and actually everything started very well for Magnus. It was Caro-Kann. He played actually not maybe the most obvious line, because he trapped his bishop as if it was French 1. Don't do this to your bishops, by the way. Magnus is allowed to do everything, you're not, so don't do it. There is a line that I know with queen c7, and then going bishop d6 and knight e7, hoping for f6 e5, which later Magnus actually showed, which sounds better to me, because it does not allow white to trade this bishop, who is actually not the best one, because pawns of white blocking him. And the game moved on. And white decided to go for some queenside majority attack. This is some advanced technology, and strategically it's not the best way actually, because it creates a backward pawn on c3. So if you're watching it, please like close your eyes. You never saw this, as well as Magnus did the same, but Magnus at least is doing for e5 purposes. C3 pawn is permanently weak. But actually it may be confused Magnus, or maybe he evaluated position kinda differently, because the main plan of Magnus probably should have been attacking the pawn. Maybe double up, try to apply some pressure, move the knight somewhere, maybe go knight f5, knight e7, because this is a weakness. If your opponent has a weakness, try to find the resources to attack it. But Magnus goes knight f5, and right here he, I don't know, maybe like lost concentration or something, because right here he started playing some moves that more or less logical, but it allowed praggnanandhaa to consolidate and actually create threats. Because rook a6 attacks b6 pawn, there is a chance to infiltrate on the 7th rank, and it already smells not good. Rook b8, h4. He's trying to combine attack on the king side and on the queen side, because if you have an opportunity to attack through the whole board, it's pretty cool. And eventually, even though Magnus had more time, this attack paid off for Pragg because he ruined pawn structure of Magnus, because right now he has extra pawn on the left wing, when it's very hard to perform with these 4 pawns versus 3 because one pair is doubled. And Pragg definitely showed that he's going to play for a win, keeping queens on the board. And right now, this position is a position of the dream if Magnus Carlsen played white, because it's knight versus bishop, bishop is bad, and Pragg actually also got a lot of value out of it. Because it's very hard to defend everything with the bishop, plus the king right now is a bit weak. But Magnus managed to survive. It was like already a tough time trouble. Everybody had around 10 seconds. And Magnus offered the queen trade, and right now not an inexplicable thing happened, but really weird move from Magnus, which was king e8, when he really had an opportunity to play queen g7, offering a trade, and then activity definitely would be sufficient to at least make a draw. But he decided to move away, and this was the first loss of Magnus in this tournament. Pretty pity one, but yeah, all the pieces of white became too active. He managed to win a piece for one move, and then it was taken back. But then it was like queen in game, another queen in game. Previous one was against Abdusattorov. This is a new one, and the problem was that the king was cut, and it definitely didn't help any Magnus business, and the game was over pretty soon. So the first loss, but you might think, okay, now Magnus definitely was prepared. He will be angry, motivated, destroy everybody, and partly that's true. Again, neither back, again. Interesting position right here. Magnus is not very comfortable because he's down a pawn, but I don't want to show the whole game. But right here, one small inaccuracy was made, and Magnus plays boom, queen b5. And you might say, what boom? What are you talking about, bro? He's down a pawn and he's trading queens. Are you both insane? No, we're not. Why is it so? Because after queen b5, a, b. And we have a pin over here, and there is no easy way to get rid of it. And we have a threat of b6, b7, and this knight is about to fall. And that's the main problem. That's the reason why Niederbeck had to retreat, play queen d6, but then boom, queen e8. Which is a problem. Right now, queen f8 was the defense, again, seems solid, and if you calculate for 2 moves, then maybe it is, but right now you can stop the video and calculate a tactic, find a tactic that leads to the victory, which was rook takes c5, rook takes c5, knight e7, boom, extra piece, fork, we won. So, it didn't happen, king h7, which allows Magnus to be back in the play, he won a pawn back, and right now actually already mate in 1 is the real threat. And then after g6, it opens the king even more, he goes for some adventures. It's really good for black that there is no good discovery that wins either queen or rook. Knight e5, king f6, rook e1. Actually right here, if I recall correctly, somewhere Magnus could play some rook c4, which was very, very strong, which was basically winning because of rook g4 threat, knight e5 threat. Such rook lifts usually deadly. But he decided to go knight e5, and still position was winning, but the game messed up. And right here, in this position, you will see right now the video. Magnus played queen g7, queen g6, rook g7, he resigned, and it was a very, emotional moment. Because right here, position of Magnus was good. He could play queen e6, and his position really better, a lot better. It's probably not the only move, but he could give a lot of checks. He could force the king to go where he wants. He could try to play knight f7 and deliver some mate, but because he was in the time trouble, he rushed, played natural queen g6 move to win some time, because after every move you have an increment, and received rook g7 right in his face. And many people after that would just put the hands down, just really be very upset, tilt, cry, anything like that, because he was playing Rapid so well. And right now Blitz 2 losses in a row against like young stars. But if you know the Magnus, of course he wouldn't do it. It only motivates him, and he just said, okay. Like it was like the famous quote of Brazil team in the football. It's like, you will score as many as you can, we will score as much as we want. So right here, that's what happened with Magnus. He said, okay, you won me, I was playing on chill, right now I will just enter berserk mode and kill you all. And he actually won 10 games in a row. Not starting from this moment, but it was really astonishing play, just outstanding. But let's see who became victims of him. And the first one is actually Jan-Krzysztof. Uh, Magnus made a lot of draws throughout this tournament with him, but this game was exactly winning, and it was a Berlin. If you hear the word Berlin, you fall asleep automatically. I understand, but right here Magnus didn't, and even though position was extremely symmetrical, pretty drawish at this point, Magnus found a way how to spice things up. All his moves, rook b1, bishop d2, was about to play b4. And after b4, we can try to advance on the queen side, create some threats. In the game, queen e6 was played, and boom, b4. Right now, we don't want to take, because after taking, there is a chance to create outside passed pawn. And if you read some books and studied something, you know that outside passed pawn can be a great, valuable pawn that will distract your opponent, that will give you a lot of value. And probably Anish should have avoided capture, but in Blitz it's some unbelievable decision, because you need to give up a pawn, but then after bishop a6 with a counter-attack, somehow we can win it back. In the game, AB happened, and this is it. Magnus just again, step by step, he's applying pressure, and even though engine can show like zeros for, I don't know, 10 minutes straight, 10 moves, 20 moves, he still applies some pressure. He's never waiting, he's still looking like a predator for his prey. What happened next? Rook c8, knight takes d4, he got the bishop pair, reinforced the pawn structure. Right now he attacks the pawn. Playing c5 is too risky, because the whole pawn structure can fall, plus we have a rook in the back that helps us a lot. Knight g3, pawn was won, and I mean, I think that nobody had doubt that Magnus can win the position with an extra pawn. Actually, I remember the position when he didn't win against in MVL with an extra piece, but let's not talk about that. It was also a less recent event. But yeah, it was more complicated. But right here, Magnus using centralization, by the way, when you are in the endgame, centralizing the king is a very important tool to win. Plus he has outside passed pawn, and he just simply pushed his pawn, used his advantages, and destroyed the niche. He resigned because of mating threats in the end of the line. Who's next? Who's next? And next one, praggnanandhaa, the one who brought him down before. So probably Magnus was like really angry. He plays white pieces. He got the bishop pair from the opening. But Pragg plays dc, and bc actually pretty interesting move, but Magnus decided not to do it and played bishop c4, baiting Pragg to take the knight, kinda ruin his pawn structure, but open up the line for the rook that will be able to connect with the bishop and create a lot of pressure. c5 was played, queen e2, cd, bishop takes a6, queen b2, creating a great connection, because when you have a bishop pair, your main bishop is the one that your opponent doesn't have. Right now it's a dark square, and he cannot be countered. That's the reason why we need to pay the biggest attention to him. He's here the man, as he's the main guy. And even though engine, as usual, shows approximately equal position and the pawn structure ruined, Magnus doesn't care. He just plays castle. He says, you can't mate me, but I can use this G file to destroy you. B5, bishop goes back, E5, that's a good idea to isolate the bishop. Right now, this bishop is about to die, but Magnus said, no, sorry, stop here. My bishop will be alive. Actually, he takes important square on D8 under control, so that we could continue attacking and applying some pressure. Queen E6, Rook C1, Rook C1, Rook C1 trading everything, and right now we have a bishop pair versus two knights, and position is open. And Magnus plays Queen C7, activating his queen. He's actually, I mean, up to 3 minutes almost against Pragg at this point. Like, as I said, it's really some super fast berserk mode. He just see everybody and destroy. G6 and A4. Perfect move. Why? Your bishop is not working. We wanna make him work, and right now he's threatening to take, and even if black takes, this pawn on a6 will be still weak, and it's a good idea to split up your opponent's pawns like that because you can attack them after it. Magnus plays a very cool intermediate move, bishop c4, because the queen cannot leave this knight. Knight d5 is played. By the way, don't pin yourself like that, but Pragg didn't have a lot of choice, and Magnus just takes the pawn, and this is basically over. He won second pawn, the game moved on, but it's rather formality. And another victory of Magnus, revenge is taken for the first Blitz game, and who do you think is next? Actually, next was Abdusattorov, but the game wasn't that interesting. Grandmaster from Uzbekistan didn't play this game well, gave Magnus some advantage, so I don't think this was that interesting, because as you can see, all the games besides the losing one, Magnus tries to apply the pressure, even in the losing ones. Magnus like try to squeeze this little advantage, and this is his typical style. That's the reason why I think it's like best games, prime games, because it defines his style. Next game was extremely important, probably the most important game from all, against Wei Yi, because after first part of the Blitz, I mean 9 rounds of Blitz, that was the last day, day number 5, and Wei was in, I mean, had like 2.5 points more than Magnus. So Magnus needed like cover this result and score 3 points more for 9 rounds, which sounds like mission impossible. But in the main role is not Tom Cruise, but Magnus Carlsen. And what did he choose? Probably some super aggressive opening? Not really. He chooses just some King's Indian structures, but only for white. And he trades queens from the very beginning. And it looks like what you're doing, Magnus. You need to win. Why you trade pieces? Why you trade queens? But you'll see why. And actually, the structure is very terrible for black from my experience, because white has a simple plan. You push it pawns, you place the knight somewhere on c4, you place then b5. It's very hard to continue and very hard to defend. And this pawn on c3 is a real menace. It just and supports and helps us to attack. Knight f6, h3, bishop moves back, knight g5. Magnus wants this bishop to go to the bad spot. And rook e1, defending the pawn, trying to let this knight go. Bishop e6, our knight cannot really move it, so we move our bad bishop, who was on g2, really like chilling on the beach right now. He's going to at least help our pieces. Knight d7, knight b3, not letting the knight infiltrate and get to the outpost. A5, where he says, no, I really want the square, so please go away. But Magnus is just in time, and I think it's not the best idea to push the pawn on the side where your king stands, plus its opposite color, opposite castled kings, and attack might be harsh, which Magnus actually proven. B4, the move that I warned you about before. AB, right now rook a8 is the threat, and actually already at this point the engine was showing some solid advantage, which Magnus didn't convert very properly, but still he had some activity. Knight b6, white tries to trade active pieces, creating a fork, leaving no choice for white. Knight takes, knight h4, attacking the weakness, really tiny but cool move. Knight g2, Magnus sees his piece is not working, it should work, so he moving either to d5 or to g4. King c7, knight here, knight c6, offering a rook trade. Magnus doesn't want to trade. Actually, if you're playing for a win, in a lot of situations it's good to trade rook pair, because with two rooks for your opponent it's easier to defend, plus he might find some counterplay. But what do I know? If I knew more than Magnus, I would be probably already a world champion. Bishop c4. He trades the bishop who was bad, plus this bishop is defending g6, so we need him dead. Right now we can both go to d5, both go to g4, but Chinese grandmaster is very precise. Knight e7, not letting the knight have an outpost. Rook a8, trying to infiltrate, he says again no. Knight g4, another try of Magnus, another opportunity to create a pressure, another question that he asks. Knight g8, still no progress. Rook takes, king f1. We already remember that centralizing the king good, and that's what Magnus do. King e2, but Wei Yi said, okay, I don't really want to draw, I don't want to just wait, even though probably it was the best strategy because his position very solid. He actually went to complicate the game, which against Magnus Carlsen is not the best way of play, and he kind of ruins structure of Carlsen. He wants to attack over here, but he underestimated the fact that this G file is so valuable and Magnus can get so many things from it that it wasn't worth it for black. Because right now, let's say after rook h4 or rook g7, there is a pin. King can go to d6 and you can stop the video and again find the tactics. And it was rook e7, king e7, knight f5, winning uh, the rook, and we end up with an extra piece in the end. King went to d6, rook g5, rook takes, funny trick, because knight f5 still impossible. And even right now, it's like 3 versus 3, knight versus knight, rook versus rook. But still Carlsen, not getting upset. He continues constantly applying pressure. He continues creating threats. He's trying to find this window of opportunity. And he found it. Because right now, there was this check threat, and king e7 doesn't help. Because after rook d5, it's a fork, it's a double attack. And like that, Magnus won a pawn. And Wei Yi, out of desperation, played king f5, not seeing knight g3, which a lot of you probably have in normal games, and nobody is really ensured from it. And this was super important game, and Magnus just continued his streak. We'll maybe take a look at one or two games. One game against Keymer, I don't know. Magnus really farmed him very well in this tournament, almost all the games he won. And right here, position was really promising for white. White had more space. Magnus plays queen b7, and Keymer says, okay, let's play queen f3, trade off. I will not lose at all. Takes, but Magnus says, you know what, maybe you will. Knight f4, creating a pin. There is no easy way to defend this pin, so knight f4, and right now we have a choice to take bishop or the knight. You might stop the video and write down in the comments who do you think is better to take and why. But I'll move on. Of course, better to take with the bishop, because then we have a position bishop versus knight. Plus, the pawn structure is extremely perfect for Carlsen, because he has more pawns in the middle, and he has an idea to undermine the pawn chain in order to create a backward pawn on b3. Knight e1, a5, rook b1, bishop c3, a4. And right now he could double up and stuff like that. But this knight would be a pain in the ass, plus this knight could defend this pawn on his own somehow. That's the reason why Carlsen just decided to trade it. And he goes for the rook endgame, which is very hard to convert. Plus, Keymer didn't blunder. Capture rook b2 and reinforced his other rook. But it didn't really put any hesitation in the Magnus' mind. He plays d5. You say, okay, why did he give up a pawn? Because he has c4 and he wants to pick up another pawn. Not like the knight one, but just straightforward. And he won a pawn. Then he won another pawn, and he ended up with an extra pawn, which usually such endgames are drawish. It's like really hard to convert. But as we said, Magnus is doing real magic in this tournament. He waited for a little bit, plus he has some time advantage over here at this point. He put the rook in front of the pawn. The best placement would be somewhere on a8, but we don't want to go to a8 because there is a rook on a6. And he just pushed his pawn. and Keymer messed up in the time trouble because eventually Magnus King went here. He didn't play a2 in order to have this window of opportunity to hide the king over there, and it led to the victory eventually, and Magnus managed to win. Even 3 pawns didn't help German grandmaster to stay alive. Uh, and just last game for dessert against Jan-Krzysztof Duda. Magnus also won pretty perfectly, just to show that Magnus played not only like in the end game long play. In this game, he again chose some like Righty King's Indian stuff, and he played like Volga Gambit but white with an extra tempo. He gave up a pawn. He really like found his wave to ride it, and he just don't see any obstacles on his way, even though he's a pawn down. The typical thing in Volga that you trying to create pressure on A and B file, and right here Magnus just destroys Polish grandmaster on his own territory, winning the pawn back on d4, defending everything, winning another pawn, and again we came to the endgame. Sorry, I promised that there wouldn't be any endgames, and it was about to be very sharp line, but we're here, so sorry for that. And as usual, Carlsen shows perfect technique. He even gave up a pawn, but because of pressure, because of threats, because of time pressure as well, because in every single game he had an advantage, he managed to outplay his opponents. And how do you think? How many points was Magnus ahead of Wei Yi? He's like tough competitor, tough rival throughout the tournament. Half a point he was ahead. So this like without this performance he would be runner up, and this like wave of haters saying that Magnus lost his shape, you would see in every comment section. But here he is, still in his prime, still playing perfect chess, even though it's rapid and blitz. His intuition, his understanding is still outstanding. And please share your opinion in the comments, like if you like the video, subscribe to our channel, would be much appreciated. What do you think? Was Magnus really great, or I'm exaggerating? And stay tuned in for the next video. Goodbye.